Hey guys, here's a step in my video process, or my working process I don't show off as much. So obviously I work both heavily in the digital world as well as the analog world. Not enough coffee yet. Anyway, recently I've been going back to doing my layouts more on paper. One of the reasons is because in this process, I can't seem to get my digital pencil to really act like analog pencil. So I find I only have to do like kind of 2 passes on the pencil here to get it tight, and then to do my final outlining in ink like this. One of the reasons I like to do this is because it allows me to truly define all the shapes, so I don't have to do any guessing or any sort of process really. Once I go into inks, it's all sort of, I don't want to say completely in my head or completely organic. I mean, I'm definitely thinking about what I'm doing, but this is all the hard work for me, is just getting the structure of the figure down. I also like the way that the pen, especially this Uniball pen that I use, just a cheap Uniball pen like you get in an office. Oh, you can hear my Jersey accent there, I said office. Anyway, I get these nice little jaggedy kind of angles that is really hard to get when I'm working digitally, unless I'm faking it, unless I'm forcing my hand to create these little angles and stuff. But it comes across very naturally with the pen and the paper. There's a tiny, tiny, almost imperceptible bleeding that goes on that just gives it this extra edge. And then even if I'm inking, whether it's digitally or traditionally, I see it here. I'm able to translate that, but it's especially useful when I'm doing it digitally to do this first. Otherwise, things tend to be a little too smooth, a little too rounded out for my taste. And then what I'll typically do is, there's a couple of processes. I'll take this panel and the whole page. I'll either scan it in and then digitally kind of play around with some backgrounds and move some figures around and stuff, and then ink it digitally. Or I can, after scanning it in and doing those backgrounds and tweaks, print it out, either as a non-repro blue, which I can print directly onto like a strong art board that I like to work on, or just print it out on another photocopy paper and lightbox it. Either way is, so basically there's 3 or 4 different ways that I can do this. Either lightbox directly from here, that's one. Scan it in, print it out after I do some tweaks, then lightbox it. That's the second one. I can scan all this in, or even just take a photo of it, send it to myself digitally to work digitally that way. So that's the third one, and I forget what the fourth one was. Doesn't matter. Sorry, so I'll just kind of walk you through. This is the very first pass that I do. I kind of work out a little thumbnail. I wouldn't even call it a thumbnail. I'm really just looking at panels. Some spoilers here in Brian's script, so if you want to pause it, maybe you'll see some stuff, but, you know. So this is typically how I'll do my thumbnails. I'm really just looking for space. How much space do I have to show off the figures? How much space does the dialogue need? And pacing and an interesting layout. I'm not thinking about where the figures actually go. I kind of think about that in my head. But mostly I work it out on the page as I'm going. So this is sort of the first pass of pencils, super light. I mean, these are just these vague figures. Then I will take a kneaded eraser, just lightly erase. You can still see everything here. I'm simply just lightening it up even more. Then what happens? Oh, I should turn my light on. I then go in one more time with the pencil. Hopefully one more time. Some spots will take a little extra work, you know, but generally I can now just go in. I can tighten this up. This is Val's face. He's got the cigarette hanging in his mouth. I usually don't even draw this hard into the paper with the lines this dark, but I just happened to do it this time. Maybe it's for the demonstration in the back of my head. I know you need to see the lines a little darker than usual. And sometimes I won't use this pen to do all the outlines. Like this is super simple and the lines are super dark. I'll be able to light box it without having to tighten it up and get those little jagged lines. It kind of just depends on how much time I have and how much energy I have. Energy is a big thing for me in work. I have to work a lot when I don't necessarily feel like it. Pages have to get done. So that's where a lot of the sort of crutches will come in, is little ways that will help me get through a page or be productive when I don't have the mental or even physical energy to do it. One of those little shortcuts might be, I would just scan this in directly here without using my pen and getting those little extra details that I like. That's one way of creating a shortcut for myself. Just to make the workload easier is cutting out a step that's not 100% necessary. I don't do that all the time because I find those little steps are there for a reason, they do make an improvement. Also, I noticed working digitally, because I can't get my digital pen to work exactly like a pencil. I find I end up doing many more layers of this than I need to. More layers of these pencils digitally than I would with a pencil. And with a pencil here, I'm just going to do this, and then maybe that pen outline. But when I'm working digitally, to get those details, I can't say why. I don't know if it's a mental block, maybe I'm not using the tools correctly, but I end up doing like 4 layers of pencil, just refining it each time, versus with an actual pencil, because of the pressure, sensitivity, and all that stuff, I can lay down a very light line or a very strong line right on top of each other. And even though I might have to scan this, or if I'm not scanning it, then say just taking a photo of it and sending it to myself, it's actually faster in this one circumstance for me to work analog as opposed to digitally. I'm just going to do this one figure here so that it doesn't take up too much time. And I'm not completely sure about this character's design yet. It's basically Taki. Working for the government, as she does. Not exactly sure what costume I want for her. Look at this face. It's totally not in detail. One of the reasons why I do these kind of like passes is because each time I just tighten things up a little bit more than the last pass. Some people just go ahead and like they've got this loose breakdown and they can just tighten the face up, It's gonna be a pretty heavily shadowed scene. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just sort of indicate the shading here. It's gonna get darker under the breast line and start darker and then go lighter underneath here because this is more in shadow. Very rarely will I do something like use an actual brush like this to get the shapes. And as you can see, what I did here is there's like the thicker shapes down at the bottom, and then they get lighter as they go up towards the light source. I can just as easily do that with the pen here, just kind of leaving the space open, and I can read in my mind what my intention is. So there's not a huge difference, but I can see it. I can see the difference here in the very light pencils that I had here to the darker pencils to the now this pen line. Like this little line, the bicep going in front of the forearm because it's going behind her. That's kind of all the shape that I need. It explains everything about the dimension, about how her arm is posed. So that's like literally all I need right now. I can fill in the details when I go to inks, which means like all the sort of the highlights on the outfit and stuff. The first choice before I do these highlights is to think about the background. Is the background behind her mostly black or is it open? If it's mostly black, then I can't do, let's pretend like this is a pen. I can't do a highlight that's in the center of her jacket, because what will happen is if this is black and then this is black, there's just going to be this thin little line here, which doesn't describe the shape very well unless, I don't want to get too technical, but like, you know, just sort of expanding the wrinkles out from the middle to express the outside of the line. So it's just easier to simply look at it like the other way. It's just correlating. So this is mostly black behind her. So then what I'd probably do is actually something like this. And then that will be black in here and black all around it. I'm kind of explaining steps ahead of time, which can be confusing, but I'm doing that because that's what I'm doing with each of these steps, is I'm setting myself up for the next step in the process. So it's not that I'm executing things to be finished right now or to look great right now. It's just to help with the very next step, you know, sort of one thing at a time. Like imagine you're doing an obstacle course, and as you're running, you're looking ahead of yourself. You're not actually thinking about the steps you're taking at that moment. You're kind of looking at the next step, which you've already seen in your head. So when you get to that next step, you've already mentally played it in this sort of microsecond moment. So you just run right through it. So that's what I'm doing here. I've already thought about the next step just before I've done it. So then when I get there, I've already painted a mental picture in my head of what it's going to look like. That way, each step of the way here, I'm weirdly not putting a ton of effort into what I'm doing now. I'm putting more effort into what's coming next, if that makes any sense. Also, when I'm inking, this is something I've noticed, is I'm not looking where my pen is. I'm actually looking where my pen is going to go. Not all the time, in a simple little thing like this, but often I find that my eye, if I was inking like I should talk about this in an inking video, you know, if my brush is coming down this way, I'm actually kind of looking ahead as I'm inking. I don't know why that is, but it's, I guess it's part of that mental picture. You're creating a mental picture in your head. It's funny, I can't remember anything in real life. Ask any of my friends. I have a horrible, horrible memory. But when it comes to art, it's different. I can picture things and retain them. It's not the best face here. Definitely going to be working on this. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I was just saying. Oh, something about my memory. But artistically, I can remember these steps. I mean, I think that's basically it. I'm going to, probably when I go into inks, I'll just go, I mean, well, first I have to kind of erase things. I don't erase too harsh. I just erase enough that it's not totally blocking the line work later when I lightbox it or scan it and stuff. And this is going to be a heavily shadowed scene, so sometimes then to figure out my shadows if it's a complex shadow as opposed to something pretty straightforward and standard. I can do it on the fly, which I do mostly. But this is going to be like this extreme low-key lighting, heavy shadows across the faces, so I'll do a little indications there. And then the rest of the page, that's probably the hardest shot on here. I guess I don't even really need to do the outline of his face here, but I'm kind of doing it just for the video. And also because as I'm doing it, I'm realizing, oh yeah, I am picking up these little tiny angles and shapes from the pen. And that's gonna make this look better. But I'm gonna stop the video there just to keep it at a decent length here instead of something too long. And I hope some of this made sense, and I hope that it was useful to you in some way. And that's it. Take care.